Good morning and welcome to Wickford and Stanford La Hope Salvation Army on Sunday, the 20th of March in the year 2022. We're so pleased that you are able to join with us for worship this morning. My thoughts are centred around a Bible reading that for a long time has been one of my favourite stories about Jesus. And so I'm going to read from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 4, and I'm commencing to read at verse 35. That day when evening came, Jesus said to his disciples, "Let us go over to the other side." Leaving the crowd behind, they took him along just as he was in the boat. There were also other boats with him. A furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him and said to him, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" He got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, "Quiet, be still." Then the wind died down, and it was completely calm. He said to his disciples, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" They were terrified and asked each other, "Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him." Who is this? Jesus is Lord. Creation's voice proclaims it. For by his power each tree and flower was planned and made. Jesus is Lord. The universe declares it. Sun, moon and stars in heaven cry, "Jesus is Lord." The metaphor of living life as a traveller on a journey is a strong one. None of us know what is around the next corner. The central message of the Bible is that if we make sure that Jesus is travelling with us, then there really is no need to be afraid. And this whole idea is rooted in the promises of God. We shared one of the great promises of God found in the book of Isaiah a few weeks ago from the 41st chapter and the 10th verse. So do not fear. I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous hand. After teaching the crowd all day, as evening dawns, Jesus says to the disciples, "Let's travel together across Lake Galilee to the country on the opposite side of the lake." Now the disciples, these fishermen, would regularly have fished off the opposite coast, the country of Gerasa, but they would not have landed there. Firstly, because there would have been no need to, and secondly, because if they did so, they would not have been welcome anyway, for it was not Jewish. It was inhabited by Gentiles, non-Jews. What Jesus was suggesting may even have seemed reckless to them, for they had probably heard the stories of a wild man running amok through the caves and tombs on that side of the lake where they were going to head. And for most nights, when the disciples were fishing, they would hug the shoreline. Just in case there was an unexpected storm, they would be able to quickly land and be well out of it, safe and sound off the sea. But tonight, the disciples were sailing straight across the lake, straight across the deepest part of the sea. They made 3 mistakes. The first mistake was they took peace for granted. Peace of mind is something we do not miss as long as we have it. Strange to say, we don't notice it until it has gone. We suddenly find ourselves in a storm, overwhelmed by emotions caused by bereavement, by argument, by failure, by tragedy, by falling out with family and friends. And at such times we suddenly miss our peace of mind. What is our way back to that peace? Joseph Scriven realized the need to invite Jesus into each and every circumstance when he wrote, "Oh, what peace we often forfeit. Oh, what needless pain we bear, all because we do not carry everything to God in prayer." The peace of the world is taken away by the events of the world, a world in which we have to live. We can only regain peace in our lives when we invite Jesus back into the central part of our life. Jesus is recorded as saying in John's Gospel, chapter 14, verse 27, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid." You see, peace is only possible if Jesus is travelling with us. The second mistake the disciples made was they forgot that they were travelling with Jesus. The disciples do all the right things. They welcome Jesus onto the boat. They show him to the most comfortable place on the boat. And this is the place reserved for the helmsman. And the place for the helmsman is the place reserved for the most responsible person on the boat, the person responsible for the safety of all those on the boat. So symbolically, they are placing Jesus in charge. But unfortunately, they then forget about him. They busy themselves. They get the oars, they look at the sail, they check that the boat is all free of leaks and is sound, and they make sure that everything is under their control. And the weather is just right at the point of departure. Risk assessments completed, health and safety checks accomplished, they set out. It does appear that they are putting more faith in their own skills and abilities than in the fact that Jesus is with them. Putting trust in ourselves, which even includes things like weather over which we have little or no control, is a real mistake. A mistake we are all tempted to make. There are so many things that can go wrong. And sure enough, things do go wrong for the disciples. It is as if they had ticked all the right boxes about Jesus and then just pushed him into a corner of their lives and forgotten about him. And suddenly the disciples come to with a jolt, with a shock. They are, or soon will be, in it up to their necks. So rather than gently waking Jesus, they shake him, they grumble at him. "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" And here we see the third mistake the disciples make. They thought that Jesus didn't care. So Jesus was asleep on what we might describe as a seat cushion, the cushion reserved for the helmsman as he sat at the back of the boat and steered. And the disciples mistake this untroubled sleep of Jesus as a lack of interest in their welfare. They thought he did not care. How tempting it is to assume that when we are going through rough waters, Jesus has not heard our prayers, that Jesus does not care, that our prayers have indeed gone unanswered. But Jesus is not indifferent to what is going on in our lives. The disciples mistook the untroubled faith of Jesus as indifference, when in fact it pointed not to indifference, but to complete confidence in the will of God. Jesus had never once left the company of the disciples and abandoned ship. He was in the middle of the storm with them all along. And the hardest lesson to learn for us as Christians comes with this verse from Isaiah chapter 55 verse 8. The Lord says, "My thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways." It follows that God's timetable, you see, is not the same as our timetable. And this is seen in a famous verse from Ecclesiastes chapter 3 verse 11. He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the human heart, yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. He is in charge, and he is in charge of the timing as well. If the disciples had been dismayed by the show of humanity of Jesus when he was asleep, they are now awestruck by the show of his authority once he is awake. For in the same way that at the beginning of time, God brought the waters under control as part of his act of creation, so now Jesus brings creation to order again. The whole story is a metaphor for taking control of the spiritual forces of the world. We are told that Jesus changes everything with just two words: be still. The words were not just addressed to the wind, but also to the apostles whose lives were in turmoil. And Jesus still speaks into the turmoil of our lives with these two words. He speaks them to you, he speaks them to me. Be still. Or as the psalmist said, be still and know that I am God. In fact, upon reflection, the apostles had heard these words spoken before in the healing of a very disturbed man right at the beginning of the ministry of Jesus. You can turn and read it in Mark chapter 1 verse 25, when Jesus tells an evil spirit to come out of the man and be still. Just as evil was at work in the heart of one man back then, so evil is at work in the storms of life which would steal away our peace of mind today. On hearing these words, the evil spirit in the man gave up. Likewise, when Jesus repeats the words to the wind literally grew weary and gave up. And Jesus turns the whole episode into a question of faith for those with no peace of mind. He asks, do you still have no faith? If you want peace of mind, the only true peace we can know in this world comes through relationship with Jesus. When we invite Jesus into our lives, the storm can still rage about us, but we are in the calm at the eye of the storm. Having Jesus on board is the antidote for all our worries and stresses. Whatever causes us anxiety, fears for ourselves, for the future, for our family, for the world. To voyage with Jesus is to travel in peace, even in the storm. Be still, for the presence of the Lord is moving in this place. May God bless you.